Hey guys, this is Tom Box. Welcome to MST.TV, and today we are going to talk about one of the biggest game changer cards of the Mega Tin. Of course, it's going to be Crossout Designator. Now, some people say that Crossout Designator is going to ruin the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Others have praised it for making the game much more playable. And personally, I'm indifferent to those opinions because it's just going to be a part of the game, and rather than whine or praise about it, let's actually get better with the card in general so that we can adapt this card to the best of our abilities. And that's what this video is going to be about. We're going to be adapting to Crossout Designator, and I'm personally prepared to drop big bucks for this card because I've tested it on my live stream, and let's just say that I use this to negate triple tactics talent. It was marvelous when that happens. I used to stop imperm, stopping Nibiru. There's a lot of cards that got weaker, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. Cards that got weaker. We're also going to look into adapting this card in the game ones, the game going first and the games going second after siding, and we're even going to talk about the decks that got better simply because this card exists. So make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button, hit subscribe, ding notification button. Don't forget to leave a comment about how you're going to attempt to adapt this card into the deck. We're just going to do a bit of theory crafting. We're going to talk about it and see if we can come up with an ideal solution towards how to play this card correctly. Now, as mentioned in my Twitch stream, of course, these cards are not the actual card. These are just proxies that I've made so that you guys can test it out in real life as soon as possible and maybe get your hands on the card, see how much impact it actually has. So you guys can go check out my Discord link down in the description, and special shout outs to my patrons that requested this card. So it's free. You guys can check it out. Discord in the download channel. You guys can just print it out yourself. It comes in a nice 3x3 sheet so you can shove it in every deck and test in every possible way. So first things first, let's get into the card text. Crossout Designator, a quick play spell card. In terms of its card text, declare one card name, that's the activation because the semicolon is there. Banish one of that declared card from your main deck, and if you do, negate its effects, as well as the activated effects and the effects on field with cards of the same original name until the end of this turn. You can only activate one Crossout Designator per turn. So essentially, it's a more versatile call by the grave that can reach into your own deck, and it doesn't last quite as long. So let's take a look at the cards that got weaker. Let's take a look at some of the cards that took the biggest impact first by gaining a weakness because of the release of Crossout Designator. And no other card comes to mind aside from Nibiru, the Primal Being. That card is the menacing definition of breaking a combo board completely. And in fact, it dictated how combo players had to play their deck for a very long time. Since the release of the card, you either go into a negation before the 5th summon, or you risk getting hit by Nibiru, smashing your entire board, or the alternative way to play through Nibiru is that you eat the Nibiru and play with the remainder of your board to push through it. So with the release of Crossout Designator, simply by teching a single copy of Nibiru yourself, the Crossout Designator has the potential to turn off the Nibiru and just cancel it straight out. Some might argue, hey, what if they draw into their Nibiru? Well, if they drew into the Nibiru, then they drew into a Nibiru. That means they have it in hand, so that even if they pass turn to you, you're going to need the Crossout Designator, and you're going to have to cancel their Nibiru with your own, I guess, Nibiru in your own deck. But that being said, it just means that, you know, Nibiru plus another hand trap is still effective moving forward, so it doesn't completely kill off Nibiru straight out. It just means that they have more options to play through Nibiru without the reliance of, say, you know, going into a specific combo just so that you have a negation with like an Appaloosa or a Dragoon or something along those lines. The second card that I believe took a huge hit is actually Forbidden Droplet. Not that the card was like significantly weaker, but I would say the cost of the card in order to guarantee its success has gotten a little bit heavier, because if you don't send a spell card along with a monster, that means Forbidden Droplet runs the chance of getting negated. And it runs the chance of getting negated by your opponent just flipping a Crossout Designator, banishing their own Forbidden Droplet, and your droplet gets negated. If you send 2 monsters and the droplet is 3 cards, that's 3 cards that's not really doing anything, being tossed into the graveyard, where your opponent only used 1 card, you result in a -2, and if they're trying to negate 2, I guess, interactions against your opponent, those 2 interactions are still live, and now you're down to basically 3 cards to play against your opponent, which could be basically fatal if you don't do this correctly. So now when you pay a cost with the Forbidden Droplet, you have to consider tossing in a spell. And spells technically don't synergize as well for most decks to get something from the graveyard synergy or some sort of graveyard activation. So with that in mind, Droplet is going to be a heftier cost, and you run the chance of basically it not successfully resolving, because not only are you trying to turn off monsters, but now you also have another spell to worry about. And if you're talking about Imperial Order, I'm sorry, Imperial Order is still just part of the problem. So that's one card that's always going to be able to negate you. So you gained another facet to the card where the cost is now heavier, and you run more chances of it not successfully resolving, especially when there's only one card on the field that you want to negate with Droplet. Now you have to take a guess whether or not you want to send a spell, and if it's a monster that can guarantee to negate, you're basically trading 2 for 1, and that's not exactly the best price to pay. And on that note, Dark Ruler No More is also kind of in the same camp. Since the monsters definitely cannot respond to the Dark Ruler No More, I would say spells can, and because spells can, you can use Crossout Designator and banish your own Dark Ruler. But there's a little bit of a caveat to this. How many cards are you actually going to side in to deal with, say, some of these blowout cards? Is it worth it? Is it worth crippling your build just so that you have a little bit more protection? You're adding kind of like bricks into your deck just so that you can counter those cards that your opponent would use against you, but it's completely useless if you draw them. So there's a little bit of a balance act that you have to do, and we'll talk about that when we talk into the deck building and the adapting into your deck build of how to use this card. Now, other cards that are also affected are the most frequently used hand traps, the ones that are used by both you and your opponent. You can expect that there's going to be a weird exchange. We can see why OCG plays a lot of 2 of some of these cards, because one for you to use yourself, and basically one to throw away because the additional copy is not exactly going to help you once they get negated by the Crossout Designator. So you have to be very careful. Infinite Impermanence is probably the one that probably took the most significant hit, because Infinite Impermanence was one card that was very difficult to stop. You can't gamma this card. This is the card that you can just activate. It's like, GG, what are you going to do about it? You just have to eat it. But now you can actually stop the imperm, and even if your opponent sets the imperm, you can still hold on to your Crossout Designator. Say you're going second, especially during the game 1, you can just, oh, they imperm me, I'm going to chain Crossout Designator, now I'm going to turn them off. And more like strangely enough, if you open Crossout Designator with your own imperm, you can imperm your opponent's monster first, and then when they try to imperm you back, you can Crossout Designator them, because yours already resolved, their monster gets turned off, and they can't turn off your monster. It is kind of one-sided to some degree, especially in the game 1. Ash and Veil are probably 2 other cards that are going to have a significant impact, but that's no surprise. I mean, they are the most frequently played hand trap anyway, and Triple Tactics Talent to some degree. I think this is me pulling from my live stream case where I have Triple Tactics Talent, my opponent also had it, and I purposely activated one of my monster effects just to see what they would do. They activate Triple Tactics, I activate my Crossout Designator, which I thought was dead, but apparently I just activated Crossout Designator, threw my Triple T into the banish, and then that was the end of that. They were unable to draw, they can't look at my hand, and it was negated. So a lot of these power cards that used to be full follow-ups, Crossout Designator basically is a step above for taking care of those particular scenarios. Now let's take a look at deck building. So for adapting the build for your game 1, you were likely going to see 2 to 3 copies of Crossout Designator shoved into basically most decks. Unless the deck is aimed to go second, then they'll probably play 0. They'd rather play an extender or a board breaker over playing a card that will more or less just be used to stop stuff like imperm. I think they'd rather just play through the imperm and eat it and just call it a day and just extend through it, rather than play this card and negate it. I think more extender pieces would be just more effective for going second builds. But for the going first builds, you're likely going to see them adjust their build to put these cards in here, 3 copies of it maybe, and then there have to be some blowout cards to be shoved in there. For combo decks, you can expect that they are going to put in the Nibiru in there just so they can stun out the Nibiru, and even if they draw into it, it's not that bad because combo and mid-range are both affected by Nibiru almost at the same level. I think mid-range take a bit of a harder hit because they're usually closer to their end board, whereas combo decks, maybe they can actually play through it and extend past it. That's just, some of the observation that I've seen so far with the card. So that's one particular note about that. What about control players though? Can control players benefit off of this card going first or second? I mean, if your deck runs a ton of hand traps and you are also susceptible to the same hand traps, then yes, you're likely going to see Crossout Designator put there too. And will they put stuff like Harpy's Feather Duster in their main deck? I personally think might be a bit of a waste, because unlike Nibiru, where it's affecting both combo and mid-range style decks, the Harpy's Feather Duster is mainly catered towards back row heavy decks, and if you have the Harpy's Feather Duster against a combo deck, it's pretty useless. You would wish that it was something else that would interact with the monster instead, and that also weakens the Crossout Designator because you don't exactly have as much stuff to deal with the gas, and that makes it so that the Crossout Designator, like, it's good, but not as good for a control player. But that's my opinion. You guys can leave a comment down in the comment section about how it can be better for the control player as well, especially if I missed something about that. So what about going first? What about a sided game going first? If you're going first, keep them in. I think you should also change up the lineup, because if your opponent is going to be siding some stuff that's heavy against you, like especially like hard counters against your deck, those are the cards that you probably want to shove one-ups, especially if you're a deck that's a 1-card or a 2-card combo deck. Then it's absolutely worth it to get that additional level of protection. Mid-range deck are the best example of this, because usually they can play through like at least 1 negation's fine, but 2 usually stuns them a little bit too hard. So 1 Crossout Designator allows them to eat that hard one, whereas the one that is not as impactful, they will play right through it, which is why it's still worth it to play Crossout Designator. And your opponent might switch out their hand traps a bit too, because Imperm might not be as effective. Imperm, they're likely going to keep it because they can still set it on the board, but there's a lot of like other hand traps they can't completely take out. That's why you see a lot of like weird 2-ofs in OCG going on. In addition, for going first, if it's a mirror match, you're likely going to see this card 100%, because now Crossout Designator is a versatile, almost omni-negate against any card that they play. And they just have to be very careful of how they want to activate it. I mean, against, like, say, a Sword Soul deck, if they go into Moye, you know that they're going to Long Yan. You can even negate the Long Yan in their hand so they can't summon out the level 10 Synchro Monster because you prevented the 6 from coming out. That is actually significant. And it can completely turn a whole game around, because now they lost their negation. They basically revealed whatever they had in their hand, and that's how you can really adapt your gameplay, and that's something that we have to keep in mind. That's just one example of a potential case that would happen. Now, if you go second, I highly recommend you guys just take out the Crossout Designators, take out all copies of it, unless you know exactly what you're doing in the mirror match. I mean, in a mirror match, if there's main deck monsters involved on the board or main deck spells and traps that you need to turn off, then keep it in. Then you can attempt to use Crossout Designator as long as it's already part of your deck and you don't have to side specific cards in for that particular purpose. Then it's okay, because if your opponent's playing Mystic Mine, I don't recommend you siding into Mystic Mine just to Crossout Designator a Mystic Mine. I think that is kind of weird in my opinion, because why don't you just play cards that will just legitimately take out the Mystic Mine, like Cosmic Cyclone, Twin Twister, something that is better than letting your opponent leave it on the field, something along that line, you know what I'm saying? Because why don't you just take care of the problem rather than put a band-aid on it? Crossout Designator is more or less a band-aid card to take care of things temporarily, and sometimes the band-aid fix is enough, but in most cases it's not, and you're risking drawing into like bad cards going second. If your opponent has an established board and you're drawing cards that need timing to set up, if you're not a control deck, it's definitely not worth it for you to go into that route, because you're going to be playing from behind. Even if you do get to activate the card, your opponent is still going to basically hold you down as they regain control, and control decks love snowballing like that. So in that particular case, going second, probably take it out. Play board breakers like, I don't know, Kaiju, Super Poly, stuff that is hard to respond to, there's no respawn timing to, or stuff that is just going to bait out your opponent's board instead. Those cards definitely will gain a lot more value and perhaps synergize better with your deck rather than putting in bricks into your deck. that is not worth it. So just because you have Crossout Designator doesn't mean that you should shove in like every single hand trap into the deck. Just play the ones that affect you the most, and you can cycle the correct hand traps just in case the Crossout Designator has more value when you go first. Now, before we get into the decks that got better, we have a merch drop alert. Check out MSTmerch.com because the flaming hot OG orange sleeves are now available. But not only that, we now have sleeve protectors, over sleeves. We have extra shield because no one ever complains about getting a little bit of extra shield on their characters or their cards, and having that bit of extra protection could keep your foil sleeves nice and pristine for a much longer period. So check it out, MSTmerch.com. There's a bundle sale going on, so if you get it on the bundle, it's definitely cheaper, especially if you plan on getting both the sleeve and the over sleeve. Check it out, MSTmerch.com, and let's begin with our decks that got better. Now, if I didn't mention your particular deck, if you are a mid-range or combo deck, note that this affects you as well. Any deck affected by Nibiru now is a lot better because they can stop it. A lot of these decks are unable to stop Nibiru, and they're stuck eating the Nibiru, ultimately losing the advantage that they got going first. Now, Salamangreat can develop their entire combo without worrying about the Nibiru as long as they have a Crossout Designator in their hand. That is, I would say, one of the most significant things available to the deck. So we gotta be prepared to eat that rage, eat that roar. Other decks such as Ignister deck, building their combo, going to that towers, still very good. Unfortunately, still weak to Kaiju, but hey, you take what you get, but you can still stop stuff like Ash, more stuff to stop Ash rather, and more stuff to stop Nibiru. Phantom Knight, the same idea. Prank Hit, same idea. And don't forget about Drytron. Drytron can stop Droll. That's a pretty big one. They probably won't be able to stop Cycle Reader until they go into game 2 and just basically side in a Cycle Reader just to stop your Cycle Reader. That is going to be very huge. So I do anticipate that Drytron will probably take a bit of a hit, because if Drytron doesn't take a hit and they get Crossout Designator, I'm seeing that they are probably going to stay up top. Now, there's also Tri-Brigade as well. Like, I don't know, Ghost Bell. It's mainly just Ghost Bell for me, and maybe stop Imperm as well, because if they can stop the Imperm, the Appaloosa stays live, and the Revolt is likely going to go off just as hard, and that's a pretty significant thing. Like, all of these things are like hand trap things that, completely counter one part of the board, and now you can actually counter that counter. And yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? If you guys have anything to add to this segment, other ways that you guys believe that this card benefits or ruins the game, leave it down in the comment section. Do you think that the ban list needs to take care of a couple of combo decks just so that this card isn't as strong? Let me know down in the comment section as well. And that is all I got for this video. If you guys learned a thing or two about the card, why it is impactful, smash that thumbs up button. If you guys want to check me out on Twitch, you can go check out my Twitch link down in the description, MST.TV _Tombox. That's me. And I'd be happy to duel you guys. I just mainly do audience duels for now. And check out MSTmerch.com. Thank you. Hit the subscribe, ding the notification bell. Don't forget, I'm going to have an ultimate counter guide segment very, very soon once the next format kicks in. And I can't wait to do a balance analysis to see what is still on top. And I'll see you guys in the next one.